Overlord is easily one of my favorite animes, whether it be its massive world and the fantastic world building complementing it, or the deep and complex characters that inhabit it. There's a lot to appreciate about Overlord, but the one thing that sticks out in my mind is the openings and endings. All of them are very good, however, I think the third ending, Silent Solitude, is in a different class of its own. There's a lot of symbolism and foreshadowing embedded into the art and lyrics of this ending, and I'm surprised that it isn't talked about enough. In the first shot of the ending, we see Ainz' head surrounded by a cloud of darkness, with some light near him on the outside of the cloud, before slowly the light and Ainz get engulfed by the darkness, leaving his red eye pulsing before it fades to black. I think this is symbolic of how Ainz is losing what little of his humanity he has left, or how Ainz' influence is growing throughout the world through Nazarik's conquests. The color white symbolizes purity, innocence, and peacefulness. The darkness consuming what little white is on the scene is symbolic of how Ainz' innocence, purity, and peacefulness are fading away. When Ainz first started playing Yggdrasil, he was innocent and unaware of how things worked, being ruthlessly picked on for his class and was on the verge of quitting the game entirely. Until Touch Me saved Ainz and showed him the ways of the game. The Ainz that we see now is a far cry from the new player he started as. He's ruthless and now an experienced veteran at PvP combat. He no longer feels empathy for humans and has become desensitized to the cruel methods of Nazarik. The purity of Ainz' soul is being tainted with all of the bloodshed and misery he's brought upon the world through Nazarik's conquest, which is shown as all of the white around Ainz, little as it may be, has been consumed by darkness entirely. Ainz is willing to be peaceful, only when it suits his or Nazarik's best interests. He does not enjoy senseless killing. However, he does not have any problem with staining his hands with blood when needed, and justifies it by doing it for Nazarik. It could also be argued that this scene represents a black rose surrounding Ainz. Black roses signify rebirth or a major change, which could be representing Ainz being nurtured into a monster or his rebirth in a new world. As for the lyrics for this scene, they are, "It's a deep and silent night, unable to hear anything, rest eternally." I believe these lyrics are referring to how Ainz is all alone in this world, and so far there aren't any signs of players like him, or signs of life. He can hear his own voice and can't reach anyone from his old world or guild. He is all alone, forever trapped in this new body, and resides in the great tomb of Nazarik. In the next scene, we see Ainz and Nepheria holding hands with one another while dark stems slowly begin to surround them. I believe this is symbolic of how Ainz and Nazarik view both of them. Ainz sees Nepheria as one of Nazarik's most valuable assets, due to his talent for creating potions, and wants to ensure that no harm is ever done to him. Ainz has also mentioned that while he could always kidnap Nepheria and keep him in Nazarik, he would much rather have his loyalty chained to his love for Ainz. Connecting back to the symbolism of black roses representing rebirth or a major change, this scene could be foreshadowing the ogres attacking the village on Ainz' commands, or when the village is attacked during the war, or a change in their relationship with one another, as both of these events serve to bring Nepheria and Ainz closer as they begin to develop romantic feelings. The next scene has Climb, Brain, and Gazev standing next to one another. Here you can see that the stems are avoiding Climb and Brain, but start to cover Gazev. This is foreshadowing how Gazev will meet his end at Ainz' hands in a duel at the end of the season, and how Ainz' influence is starting to take over the kingdom. I find it very interesting how Gazev's sword, the Razor Edge, flashes before cutting to the next scene. This could be foreshadowing how Gazev's death was over in a flash. Further supporting this is that the lyrics for the scene are, "Lost in the darkness, vanished without a sound." For Climb and Brain, they didn't see what Ainz did to Gazev. They saw him attack Ainz, and the next moment it was as if Gazev's soul had vanished, as his body went limp. The next scene we see Jerkniv standing proudly in the light. Shortly after, we see Fluter pop up right next to him, covered in shadows and the stems that we are all too familiar with. I really love this part of the ending as the drums go sicko mode, sounding very regal or imperial-like. This goes hand in hand with Jerkniv's character as he's hailed as the greatest emperor in his country, and the drums sounding for war are very fitting for his title as the Bloody Emperor. The way he's facing the sunlight and basking in it shows how he's charismatic and is always trying to present himself in a confident manner, no matter how dire things may be. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this scene. The first one is the drums sounding regal and imperial-like. This foreshadows how the Empire and Nazarik would wage war against the kingdom. Further supporting this is how the black stems of Nazarik are closing in on Jerkniv, cornering him further and further as he realizes that Ainz and Nazarik are a force that cannot be challenged. This could also be representing how he fell right into Nazarik's hands in trying to make an alliance with the other countries to try and kill Ainz. The lyrics of the scene support that as it's trickery and betrayal. Jerkniv believes that he's playing chess while Ainz is playing checkers, when it's actually the opposite. Jerknev believes he's deceived Ainz and Nazarick and bought the Empire time while they look to build an alliance to take down Ainz. However, Demiurge had already predicted this way beforehand and had Ainz plant the seeds of betrayal in the Empire. Starting with Fluter, as Ainz was able to convince him to betray Jerknev in return for teaching his magic. Further foreshadowing this betrayal is how in contrast Fluter is covered in darkness and the stems are starting to cover him as well. The next scene is very short and has a single black drop touching the floor before sprouting into multiple black stems. I believe the black drop represents Nazarick planting a seed by making a single move and it becomes a domino effect, leading to outcomes in Nazarick's favor and as a result growing Nazarick's influence and power in the world. By now, you may have noticed that there has been a trend with all of the scenes with the non-Nazarick characters. There are black leaves or petals floating all around them, and they are all standing behind a bright red sky. Falling leaves or petals symbolize the sacrifice of soldiers and rebirth. I think these black petals are foreshadowing the massacre of the 70,000 soldiers and the rebirth into the baby goats. As for the red skies symbolize new beginnings or a warning. I think the red sky is symbolic of the new life the non-Nazarick characters will be living under Nazarick's rule. For some like Nepheria and Enri, it will be a bright future filled with happiness. For others like Jerknev and Gazev, it looks like a hopeless future with no one able to stand up to Ainz and Nazarick. It can also be argued that the red sky is foreshadowing the war against the kingdom and the bloody massacre that will take place later in the season. Following that scene, we are shown all of the floor guardians. It is interesting to note how all of the twisted and sadistic guardians are facing toward the camera, basking in the light or shadows. They are not bothered at all by any of Nazarick's cruel methods, rather they find it amusing. However, the more honorable and compassionate guardians, Sebas and Cocytus, are looking away from the camera. It's as if they are ashamed of some of Nazarick's actions and are turning a blind eye to them. Despite all of that, both of them will continue to faithfully serve Ainz and Nazarick till the very end. The final scene we see Ainz reaching for the light. It's as if he's longing for something or someone before his hand crumbles into pieces and vanishes into nothing. It could be that Ainz is reaching to hear a voice from the outside world, whether that be his beloved comrades or other players, or it could be that he's trying to desperately hold on to what little of his humanity and emotions he has left. Further supporting this is that right before we see this scene, the lyrics "A Vicious Dream" play. This could be describing how Ainz feels that he really isn't himself and has to be putting on an act in front of everyone. Nazarick is also no stranger to vicious methods and experiments on innocent people, and Ainz has become desensitized to it all. Finally, going back to the trend of roses in this ending, it's worth noting that it seems like Ainz's hand is slightly bleeding. Could this be potentially foreshadowing someone defeating or even killing Ainz? Or could this be that one of the seeds that Ainz has planted has fully blossomed and might have pricked him? Only time will tell. Honestly, Silent Solitude may be my favorite anime ending of all time, with the phenomenal art, the hidden meaning and foreshadowing, and of course, the banger song. I can't wait to see more new Overlord openings and endings in the future and where the story goes from here.